I was staring at the mortgage papers my parents had forged my signature on when my phone buzzed with a notification from my security camera. They were at my old apartment, locksmith in tow, ready to move themselves in. What they didn't know was that I'd been living 2,000 miles away for 3 months. My name is Talina Reeves, and at 28 years old, I thought I knew my parents. I thought I understood the meaning of family loyalty. But watching them break into my former apartment through a grainy security feed while sitting in my Denver living room taught me that some people will take everything you have, then blame you for not having more to give. The mortgage papers in my hand were for $350,000. My signature at the bottom was perfect. Too perfect. Because I'd never signed them. My mother, Judith Reeves, had been practicing my signature for weeks. I knew because I'd found her practice sheets in her purse during our last family dinner, hidden between grocery receipts and her real estate business cards. She was 54 years old, a successful real estate agent who knew exactly what fraud looked like, and she'd decided to commit it against her own daughter. My father, Dennis, was standing behind the locksmith on my phone screen, checking his watch impatiently. At 56, he still had that car salesman swagger, the kind that made strangers trust him instantly and family members learn to count their money twice. He was holding a folder thick with papers, probably more documents they needed my forged signature on. The same hands that taught me to ride a bike were now trying to steal my financial future. And then there was Colton, my 31-year-old brother, leaning against the wall, scrolling through his phone like breaking into his sister's apartment was just another Tuesday afternoon errand. He'd been unemployed for 3 years, though he preferred to call himself an entrepreneur between ventures. His ventures usually ended at the poker table or the sports betting app, and his debts always somehow became family emergencies that I was expected to solve. The security alert kept pinging on my phone as they moved around outside my door. Motion detected. Motion detected. Motion detected. Each notification felt like a countdown to something I'd been preparing for, but hoped would never actually happen. 3 months of planning, 3 months of keeping secrets, 3 months of pretending everything was normal while I disappeared from their lives one cardboard box at a time. I looked around my Denver apartment, sparse but mine, every piece of furniture chosen without my mother's input, every wall color selected without asking permission. The mountains were visible through my window, so different from the flat Arizona desert where I'd grown up, where they still thought I lived. The locksmith was working on the door now. I could see him kneeling, tools spread out on the hallway carpet. My parents were committing, breaking and entering, add it to fraud and identity theft on their list of crimes they'd never call crimes because we're family, and family helps each other. The funny thing about family is that they know exactly where to cut you so the wound never quite heals. They know your social security number, your mother's maiden name, all those security questions that banks think protect you. They know that you were raised to never say no to them, trained from birth to be the good daughter, the responsible one, the one who would never let family down. But I'd already let them down. I'd been gone for 3 months, and they were about to find out that their golden goose had flown away, leaving nothing but empty rooms and security cameras to witness their crime. Growing up in suburban Phoenix, I was the family's success story before I even understood what success meant. My parents introduced me to everyone as their little genius, their future doctor or lawyer, the one who would make something of herself. Colton was 3 years older, but somehow I became the responsible one, the one they depended on, the one who never disappointed them. Our house on Saguaro Drive looked perfect from the outside. 2 stories, desert landscaping, a pool that sparkled blue against the sandy backdrop. My mother kept it immaculate, staging it like one of her real estate listings even though we lived there. Everything had its place. Everyone had their role, and mine was to excel at everything while never questioning why Colton got to fail at everything without consequence. I became a software developer, landing a job at a tech company straight out of Arizona State. My starting salary was more than my father had ever made in his best year selling cars, though he'd never admit it. The first time I got a promotion, my mother threw a dinner party and spent the entire evening telling her friends how my success was really their success, how they'd sacrificed so much to give me opportunities. The financial requests started small, a few $100s here and there, always with elaborate explanations and promises to pay me back. "Talina, honey, your father's commission check is delayed, and we need to cover the electric bill." Or, "Sweetie, Colton's car broke down and he needs it for job interviews." 2 years ago, I started sending them $2,000 every month, a standing transfer that they called temporary, but never told me to stop. My Sunday phone calls with my mother became negotiations disguised as conversations. She would start with updates about the neighbors, compliment something about my life, then pivot to their latest crisis. "You're such a blessing to this family, Talina. I don't know what we'd do without you. Speaking of which, the water heater just died, and the quote is $3,000. I started keeping a spreadsheet, initially just to track my budget, but it became evidence of a pattern I couldn't ignore. Every emergency aligned perfectly with Colton's. Trips to Vegas. The water heater died the weekend of a major poker tournament. Dad's medical bills arrived just as Colton posted Instagram photos from a casino resort. The property tax came due when my brother was betting on March Madness. $50,000. That's what I'd given them over 2 years, not including the birthday gifts, the holiday presents, the dinners I paid for because the check would arrive, and everyone would look at me expectantly. $50,000 while I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment and drove a 6-year-old Honda, telling myself I was being smart with money, building savings after supporting my family. The pocket dial changed everything. 3 months ago, I was debugging code when my phone rang, Mom calling, but all I heard was muffled conversation. I almost hung up until I heard my name. "She'll never say no." My mother's voice was clear and casual. "I trained her too well for that." My father laughed, and I heard ice clinking in a glass. "Once we get her on that mortgage, we're set for retirement. She can afford it with that fancy job." "Colton can finally have his fresh start," my mother continued. "Move into the rental property, get back on his feet without those loan sharks bothering him." "How much does he owe now?" my father asked. 30,000, maybe 40. But once we have Talina locked into that mortgage, we can help him properly. I sat at my desk, listening to my parents plan my financial imprisonment like they were discussing grocery lists. The code on my screen blurred as I realized I wasn't their daughter. I was their retirement plan, their safety net, their solution to every problem they'd created or enabled. That was the day I started planning my escape. 3 months ago, my parents invited me to what they called a family investment opportunity. They'd made a reservation at an upscale steakhouse, the kind of place my father only went when he was trying to close a major car deal. That should have been my first warning sign. The second was that Colton showed up on time, freshly shaved, wearing the only suit he owned. My mother had printed a presentation, actual color copies in a folder with my name on it. Inside were photos of a house, a sprawling ranch-style property that looked like it had seen better decades. The paint was peeling, the yard was dead grass and dirt, and even in the carefully angled photos, you could see the neighboring houses had bars on the windows. "This is our chance to build family wealth," my father said, cutting into his ribeye like he was already counting profit. "With the market where it is, this place will double in value within 5 years." I flipped through the pages. "This house is listed at $350,000? In that neighborhood?" "It's an up-and-coming area." My mother jumped in, using her real estate agent voice. "I have insider information that developers are looking at that whole district. We get in now, we make a fortune." "You'd be the primary on the loan," my father added, so casually it sounded like an afterthought. Your credit score is perfect. 790 last time you checked, right? I set down the folder. How do you know my credit score? You told us, my mother said quickly. Remember? Last Christmas? I hadn't told them, which meant they'd been checking, probably using my information they had from when they'd co-signed my first car loan a decade ago. We'd all go in together, Colton finally spoke, leaning back in his chair. I'd manage the property, handle the tenants. Finally put my business degree to use. Colton had dropped out of community college after one semester. There was no business degree, just like there were no tenants for a house that clearly needed $100,000 in repairs just to be habitable. I need to see all the paperwork, I said. Run the numbers myself, look at comparable properties, research the neighborhood development plans. My mother's smile tightened. Don't you trust your own parents? We raised you better than that. Family doesn't need contracts and investigations. Must be nice, Colton muttered, pushing his mashed potatoes around his plate. Being the only one in the family who can afford to help but choosing not to. The guilt was supposed to work. It always had before. But I kept thinking about that pocket dial, about being trained to never say no, about $40,000 in gambling debts that somehow became my responsibility. Just sign these preliminary papers. My father pushed a stack toward me. Nothing binding, just gets the process started. We can work out the details later. I glanced at the papers. They weren't preliminary anything. They were loan applications, complete with my personal information already filled in. My social security number, my employer, my salary, even my bank account numbers were typed neatly in boxes. All it needed was my signature. You've already been to the bank, I said. It wasn't a question. We wanted to make sure everything was ready, my mother said. The seller won't wait. We could lose this opportunity if we don't move fast. You put down a deposit. Another non-question. The receipt was tucked between the pages, $10,000 paid to hold the property. We used our savings, my father said, everything we had, because we believe in this investment, in our family's future. They'd gambled $10,000 they probably didn't have on the assumption that I'd cave, that I'd sign whatever they put in front of me because that's what good daughters did. I need time to think, I said, standing up. My mother's mask finally slipped. After everything we've done for you? Private schools? College? And this is how you repay us? There it was. Every dollar they'd ever spent raising me was a debt to be collected with interest. Every meal, every birthday present, every parental obligation was an invoice waiting to be paid. That night, I submitted my request to work remotely and started looking for apartments in Denver. Planning my disappearance required the same methodical approach I used for debugging code. Every step had to be tested, every variable accounted for, every potential failure point addressed. I created a project timeline in my head, working backwards from the day I knew they'd try to force my signature. The remote work approval came through within a week. My manager didn't even question it, said I'd earned the flexibility after 3 years of excellent performance. I signed a lease in Denver the same day, a 2-bedroom apartment in a building with security and a front desk that required visitor registration. The kind of place my parents couldn't just walk into. I kept my Phoenix apartment for strategic reasons. 3 months of double rent would drain my savings, but it was insurance against their discovery. I installed security cameras that connected to my phone, tiny devices that looked like smoke detectors and motion sensors. The landlord thought I was paranoid about break-ins. If only he knew the intruders I was expecting had keys. Moving happened in stages. During fake business trips, I'd pack 2 suitcases and drive to Denver instead of flying anywhere. My important documents went first, then electronics, then sentimental items I couldn't replace. I left enough furniture and clothes to maintain the illusion someone still lived there. Even hung a 2025 calendar on the wall with fake appointments written in for months ahead. The mail forwarding was delicate. I couldn't do a standard change of address because my mother would notice immediately. She had a habit of stopping by the post office where her friend worked, checking on things she had no business checking. Instead, I went paperless for everything important and had crucial mail sent to a private mailbox service that forwarded to Denver. 2 weeks into my plan, I discovered how deep their betrayal went. My banking app alerted me to a failed login attempt, then another, then a password reset request I hadn't made. I called the bank and learned someone had tried to access my account using my social security number and mother's maiden name. They'd answered all the security questions correctly but couldn't verify the phone number because I'd changed it to my new Denver number the day before. The bank's fraud department revealed more. There had been attempts to add authorized users to my credit cards, applications for new cards in my name, even an attempt to refinance my car loan with them as co-signers. Each attempt traced back to Phoenix, to IP addresses I recognized from helping my parents set up their home, WIFI. I spent a full day implementing financial lockdown, froze my credit with all 3 bureaus, opened new bank accounts at a completely different bank, one my parents had never heard of. Changed every password, every security question, every piece of information they might have known. The security questions became fiction. My first pet was now Dendrite, my favorite teacher, Mr. Turing, my childhood street, Binary Lane. The lawyer cost $500 for the consultation, but his words were worth millions. What they're attempting is identity theft and fraud, he said, reviewing my documentation. Family members commit 60% of identity fraud cases. You're smart to get ahead of this. He helped me draft a cease and desist letter I hoped I'd never have to send, advised me to document everything with timestamps, and gave me his card for when, not if, things escalated. My parents kept calling, their voices increasingly desperate. "Talina, we need those papers signed this week," my father said in a voicemail. "The seller is getting other offers." "Sweetie, just come to dinner," my mother texted. "Bring the paperwork and we'll handle everything together." I responded just enough to avoid suspicion. "Busy with work project. We'll review everything soon." Meanwhile, I was building my new life in Denver. I joined a hiking group, found a coffee shop where the barista already knew my order, and slept peacefully for the first time in years without wondering what emergency would wake me. Each day in Denver felt like therapy, showing me what life looked like without constant financial manipulation. The preparation phase was almost complete. I had evidence of their fraud attempts, a safe place they couldn't reach, and a lawyer on standby. All that remained was waiting for them to make their final move. The text came at 7 a.m. "We're coming by at noon with the notary. Have the papers ready. This is happening today." My father's message had no greeting, no pleas, just an order like I was still the obedient daughter living by their schedule. I made myself coffee in my Denver kitchen and opened the security camera app on my laptop. 4 angles of my old apartment appeared on screen, empty rooms waiting for visitors who thought they'd find me there. I positioned my phone to record everything, both for evidence and because some moments are so surreal, you need proof they actually happened. They arrived at 11:45, 15 minutes early because my mother believed catching people off guard gave her an advantage. She'd dressed like she was showing $1 million listing, navy blazer and pearl earrings, as if looking professional made fraud legitimate. My father wore his lucky tie, the one he wore for big sales, probably thinking this was just another deal to close. Colton was there too, hands in his pockets, looking around the hallway nervously like he expected police to jump out. Behind them stood a woman with a notary stamp visible in her bag and a man I didn't recognize at first. Then I saw his toolbox. A locksmith. They'd brought a locksmith to break into their daughter's apartment in broad daylight. My mother knocked first, 3 sharp raps that I'd heard my whole life. Talina, open up. We know you're home. Your car's not here, but we know you're inside. Maybe she walked to get coffee, Colton suggested, the only one showing a flash of logic. She's avoiding us, my father said, already gesturing to the locksmith. She's been dodging this for weeks. Break the lock. We need those papers signed today, or we lose the house and our deposit. I started recording on my phone and dialed their number, adding my lawyer on a three-way call. Mr. Brennan answered immediately, ready for what we'd discussed. The phone rang through my security speakers, and I watched my mother fumble for her cell. Talina! Finally. Open your door right now. Hi, Mom, I said calmly, watching her look around the hallway in confusion. I see you're at my old apartment. What do you mean, old apartment? Stop playing games and open this door. I'm in Denver, where I've been living for 3 months. Mr. Brennan, my lawyer, is also on the line. Would you like to explain to him why you're breaking into my former residence? The silence was beautiful. My father's face went from red to white in seconds. The locksmith stepped back from the door, clearly reassessing the situation. The notary was already walking toward the elevator. You're lying. My mother's voice cracked. You wouldn't leave without telling us. Mr. Brennan's voice was professionally cold. Mr. and Mrs. Reeves, attempting to forge your daughter's signature on mortgage documents is a federal crime. The attempted breaking and entering I'm currently witnessing via Ms. Reeves's security system is also criminal. My father found his voice, and it was ugly. You ungrateful little brat. We raised you. We gave you everything. You gave me a childhood, I replied, still calm. I gave you $50,000. And now you want to steal $350,000 more by forging my signature on a mortgage. It's not stealing when it's family. My mother was crying now, mascara running down her carefully made-up face. Family helps each other. I have recordings, I said, letting that sink in. Every text where you discussed forging my signature. The voicemail where Dad said you'd already submitted loan applications in my name. The pocket dial where you called me your retirement plan. Colton punched the wall, leaving a dent I'd probably have to pay for. You recorded us? Your own family? You brought a locksmith to break into my apartment? You brought a notary to witness forged documents. Who betrayed who here? My lawyer interjected with perfect timing. Miss Reeves has documented numerous instances of attempted identity theft and fraud. You should be grateful she's chosen not to pursue criminal charges at this time, contingent on you ceasing all contact and all attempts to access her financial information. We're your parents, my mother sobbed, but it was performance tears, the kind she used to cry at school plays. No, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice remained. Parents don't forge their children's signatures. Parents don't steal their children's futures. You're just two people who happen to share my DNA and thought that gave you ownership of my life. The security footage captured the moment they realized I'd won. My father dropped the folder of papers, pages scattering across the hallway. My mother sat down right there on the floor, her professional image crumbling. Colton was already walking away, probably calculating how much money he'd just lost at the casino of family manipulation. I didn't press charges, though, Mr. Brennan advised me to reconsider weekly for the first month. The evidence folder on my laptop contained enough to send them to federal prison, but I wasn't interested in revenge. I wanted freedom, and prosecuting them would have kept me tethered to their drama for years of court dates and depositions. Instead, I sent copies of the security footage and recordings to every extended family member who'd ever pressured me to help them more, support them better, be a good daughter. The family WhatsApp group went silent for the first time in its 5-year existence. 3 months later, my Aunt Pamela called from Phoenix. She was my mother's sister, but had always been the closest thing to neutral Switzerland in our family's various wars. Your parents lost the house they put the deposit on, she said, without preamble. The seller kept the $10,000 and sold to someone else. That's unfortunate, I replied, meaning it. $10,000 they didn't have, probably borrowed from someone else they'd now have to avoid. Colton's in rehab, she continued. Court ordered this time. He got caught counting cards at the casino and things escalated. I wasn't surprised. Without my money flowing through my parents to him, he'd gotten desperate. Good. Maybe he'll actually get help. Your mother asked me to tell you she's sorry. She's sorry she got caught, I corrected. There's a difference between remorse and regret, Aunt Pam. The call revealed more than she probably intended. My parents had been running this scam for years, just with different targets. They'd taken out loans in my deceased grandmother's name 6 months before she passed, while she was deep in dementia. They'd convinced my cousin Serena to co-sign a car loan, then defaulted after 3 payments, destroying her credit. There was a pattern I'd been too close to see, a trail of financial victims who all shared DNA with the perpetrators. I started getting messages from these cousins, aunts, uncles, who'd been too embarrassed to admit they'd been scammed by family. We formed an unexpected support group, meeting virtually once a month to share stories and resources. Serena was rebuilding her credit. Uncle Harrison was pursuing charges for elder abuse regarding my grandmother. Together, we were unraveling years of financial abuse that had been hidden under the tablecloth at family dinners. 6 months into my Denver life, I received a text from an unknown number. The area code was Phoenix. Attached was a photo of my childhood home, a red foreclosure notice taped to the front door. This is Colton. They lost everything. Hope you're happy. I stared at the photo for a long time. The house where I'd learned to tie my shoes, where I'd done homework at the kitchen table, where I'd been taught that family meant sacrifice. Now it would be auctioned to strangers who had no idea about the tears in the walls or the lies in the foundation. I typed back, I am. For the first time in my life, I really am. And I was. My Denver apartment had plants now, thriving in windows that got actual sunlight. I'd joined a book club where no one asked me for money. I'd been promoted at work because I could finally focus on my career instead of managing my parents' crises. I was learning that money saved could be used for my own goals, my own emergencies, my own future. I'd bought concert tickets last week without calculating what emergency would prevent me from going. The support group grew beyond family members. Friends of friends reached out, sharing their own stories of financial abuse by parents, siblings, spouses who weaponized love for profit. We created resources, templates for cease and desist letters, lists of lawyers who understood family fraud. What started as my escape became a roadmap for others trapped in the same prison of obligation. Sometimes I thought about my parents, probably living in a weekly rental now, still blaming me for their choices. They'd trained me from birth to be their safety net, their solution, their retirement plan. What they'd never taught me was that I could simply let go and let them fall. The mortgage was never about a house. It was about control, about keeping me financially tethered so I could never fully leave, never fully grow, never fully realize that love shouldn't cost $50,000 plus interest. The moment I signed that Denver lease without telling them, I'd already won. They just didn't know it yet. My phone buzzes with a text from my book club, planning next week's meeting. Someone suggests we read a memoir about family and boundaries. I vote yes, knowing I could write my own now. Sometimes the best investment you can make is in your own freedom. Even if it means leaving everything you've ever known behind and discovering that what you thought was everything was actually what was holding you back from anything real. The mountains are visible from my window, solid and unmovable. I'm learning to be like them, rooted in my own worth, impossible to erode with guilt or manipulation. My parents may have given me life, but I'm the one who finally learned how to live it.